Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Christy was in her early 50s when she left her native Honduras for the U.S. She told Bloomberg's Julia Love that she didn't have authorization to work in the U.S. But after a few months searching for work, she took a job as a cleaner on a construction site in Texas in 2021.
Texas is hot. This site was very exposed to the sun and the elements, especially in the early days. And she had to walk long distances. She was logging up to 30,000 steps a day.
Christy is her first name. She asked that Bloomberg withhold her last name for fear of reprisal. She said she worked 12-hour shifts, vacuuming, mopping floors, and scrubbing toilets in the summer heat.
Temperatura, usted sabe que el verano es caliente, muy caliente, es necesidad. Uno se tiene que estar hidratando.
The temperatures reached up to 98 degrees. And even though there were water stations, she says her bosses discouraged workers from using them.
Pero el problema era que los supervisores exigían el trabajo y ellos decían que si tomaba agua, es un tiempo perdido porque al tomar yo agua tenía que ir al baño.
They discouraged that because they didn't want workers to lose time using the restroom. And so as a result, workers were struggling to stay properly hydrated.
One day, Christy was vacuuming a staircase to clear dust and debris.
Y era un área que no está ventilada. Entonces yo estaba a chorros, yo estaba deshaciéndome.
Christy says the area wasn't ventilated. She was sweating heavily. The vacuum she'd been given had a short tube, so she was bending over to reach the ground. The last thing she remembers was standing up and everything going dark.
Cuando yo me levanto, yo miro todo oscuro y no supe más. No supe más. Y me dijeron que lo que yo había sufrido era un golpe de calor.
She woke up on a stretcher in a clinic nearby to the news that she had suffered heat stroke.
So sadly, these working conditions are common for undocumented workers in the United States. They are some of the most vulnerable workers in our economy. They face greater risk if they speak out about dangerous workplace conditions. And so, as a result, they often suffer more than other workers.
But there's one aspect of Christy's story that Julia says is unique.
What's noteworthy about her story is the owner of the construction project, Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO of Tesla, who has really rose to political power over the past year with an anti-immigrant message.
I'm Sarah Holder, and this is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. Today on the show, an investigation into how undocumented workers helped fuel the expansion of Tesla and SpaceX in Texas, while Elon Musk advocated for a crackdown at the border. One month into President Donald Trump's second term, Elon Musk has been busy aggressively shrinking the size of the federal government, targeting agencies like USAID and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. After spending nearly $300 million supporting Trump's presidential campaign, the billionaire CEO is now a regular by Trump's side. But Bloomberg's Julia Love says for most of his time in the public eye, Musk hasn't been seen as a very political figure. As he's become more conservative over the last few years, he's also become more outspoken in his opposition to immigration. If we were to chart the full arc of Elon Musk and U.S. immigration, where does that story really start?
So he himself is an immigrant. He was born in South Africa, and the Washington Post has reported that in the early days of his career, when he was launching one of his first startups, he himself was working without authorization in the United States, and it was something that his investors were concerned about.
Musk has denied this on X.
And through the years, he's been a big advocate for visas for highly skilled workers, the H-1B visa program. Tesla receives a lot of these visas for engineers and other workers. It's really in the past few years that he has become so outspoken about the U.S.-Mexico border and advancing these narratives that migrants are a threat to public safety and that they're being used to game the election with little to no evidence. I think it was in late 2023 that he expressed concern about what was happening to the border, and he traveled to Eagle Pass, which is on the Texas stretch of the border. And after that trip and all throughout 2024, he became very outspoken about immigration.
Can you give us a sense of the kinds of things that Musk was posting on X about immigration in the lead up to the election?
Yes. So here's an example from February of 2024. He wrote, illegals in America can get bank loans, mortgages, insurance, driver's licenses, free healthcare, California and New York, and in-state college tuition. What's the point of being a citizen if an illegal gets all the benefits but doesn't pay taxes or do jury duty? And then there's another tweet from March 5th in which he wrote, this administration is both importing voters and creating a national security threat from unvetted illegal immigrants. It is highly probable that the groundwork is being laid for something far worse than 9/11, just a matter of time.
These are incendiary posts. Did he have any evidence to back these up?
There were cases in which he would highlight an isolated arrest of one migrant and kind of use that to paint a picture that immigrants are dangerous, are a threat to public safety. There were other cases in which, especially the assertions of voter importation, in which he had no evidence.
How has that shift tracked with his move towards allying himself with President Trump?
Yeah, I think it's one of the issues where they really come together. And I think that he has framed it as one of the reasons why he felt like Biden should not remain in office, that President Biden did not have a handle on the border. You know, like many on the right and like Trump himself, he framed the border as in a state of crisis and was stressing the need for change.
Even before Musk took a sharp turn towards the right, he had started to turn away from his longtime home base of California and started moving his companies to Texas. He broke ground on two major projects outside Austin, the Tesla Gigafactory and a SpaceX facility. Can you give us a sense of the scale of the Tesla Gigafactory he built there?
It's huge. It's about 10 million square feet. By some measures, it's the second largest building in the world. And it was a real challenge to find enough workers to build this project. Workers on the project have told me that staffing was constantly an issue.
This is where Christy worked, the cleaner you heard from at the top of the episode. She had been hired by a Tesla subcontractor. After she fainted from heat stroke on the job, she says she had a dispute with her supervisor about the incident and was fired. Christy eventually filed a pair of complaints with OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, accusing the Tesla subcontractor of unsafe working conditions and retaliation. She's being represented by the Workers' Defense Project, a Texas nonprofit that advocates for immigrant laborers. Christy was one of 9 current and former undocumented workers at the Gigafactory who Julia spoke to. Julia also spoke with one undocumented worker who helped build a SpaceX factory outside of Austin.
In some cases, they showed me photos and videos that they took at the site. And in other cases, they were accompanied by friends or family members who also echoed details of their stories.
What made you want to look into the citizenship status of these workers?
I thought it was interesting to explore whether Musk's actions reflected this rhetoric. He's been urging the government to do more to vet the migrants that it lets in, and I was curious to know if he was scrutinizing his own operations on this front. And I think the construction sector is an interesting one to consider because that labyrinth of contractors really does give owners a lot of plausible deniability.
Tesla and SpaceX didn't respond to interview requests or detailed questions for the story. Musk didn't respond to requests for comment sent to him and his lawyer prior to publication. Coming up, we'll look at how these undocumented workers came to be hired at Tesla and SpaceX construction sites and what their working conditions were like. When Tesla set out to build a massive manufacturing facility in Austin, Texas, Bloomberg's Julia Love says the timeline for construction was extraordinarily ambitious.
I've been told that a project like this might easily take 7 years to complete under normal construction timetables, and Tesla began limited production at the facility a little over a year after it began construction.
Wow, so that's much faster than it would typically take.
Absolutely.
And how did that play into their hiring decisions?
Well, in order to meet this ambitious timetable, Tesla needed a lot of workers. And I think that the way in which the construction industry operates meant that they did not necessarily have to inquire how their contractors were finding those workers.
Tesla didn't hire workers directly. They employed contractors, and those contractors employed subcontractors. And Julia says to source workers, these contractors coordinated with local affiliates of the plumbing, carpentry, and electrical unions. But they also used other tactics.
Tesla's contractors, I'm told, hired labor brokers, which brought in workers from the Rio Grande Valley, where workers often make less.
Not all the workers that were hired to work at the Tesla site had authorization to work in the United States. And Julia says these immigrants played a pivotal role in the construction of the Gigafactory.
They worked as cleaners, plumbers, welders, roofers, pretty much any construction job that you can imagine.
And it wasn't just the Tesla site in Austin. One undocumented worker Julia spoke with helped build SpaceX's factory in Bastrop, Texas. The companies themselves, and Elon Musk, the man who leads them, weren't directly involved in the contractors or their subcontractors' hiring decisions. But Julia says there's more they could have done to enforce certain hiring standards.
I am told that Tesla did have some instructions that it communicated to its contractors. They stressed to them the importance of checking for authorization to work, running drug testing, things like that. But they did not monitor to ensure that their contractors were complying with their wishes. And I think this speaks to kind of a culture in the construction industry that that's the contractor's business, that it's up to the contractor to mind their own affairs.
Julia's sources told her that some of Tesla's top contractors did use E-Verify, a federal system employers can use to check work authorization. But Julia's sources identified some subcontractors that didn't use it. That's pretty typical for construction, but it's an option for companies who are concerned about the use of undocumented workers.
Builders can require that their subcontractors use E-Verify. That's often required up and down the chain of subcontractors on military projects and other sensitive projects. That's not typical of a project on a scale like Tesla's, where experts have told me it just wouldn't be practical.
According to the advocacy organization Workers' Defense Project, the intensity of the work also created some unsafe working conditions. The organization spoke with about 40 people who worked at the Tesla site and found that construction workers there grappled with a lack of personal protective gear and had to deal with extreme heat and a high injury rate. In 2021, a worker for a Tesla subcontractor died of hyperthermia, or abnormally high body temperature. In 2022, OSHA cited the Tesla subcontractor for allegedly exposing workers to high heat. The company contested the citation and reached a formal settlement with OSHA the next year. Julia says that of the workers she spoke with, Christy's experience fainting from heat stroke was the most serious.
Most of the workers that I spoke with did not raise those types of issues. They did express concerns that they weren't being paid as much as their peers who were doing similar jobs as U.S. citizens. That is a common issue in the industry. And Workers' Defense found widespread claims of wage theft, which is where workers are not being paid fairly or aren't being paid what they were promised.
Sources told Julia that the proportion of undocumented workers at the Tesla site wasn't actually that extreme when compared to other Texas construction sites.
They said that this project was very typical, no better, no worse than the industry. The industry as a whole relies a lot on undocumented workers.
So why was it significant that these workers were undocumented and were working on Tesla's Gigafactory?
I think it's significant in that it's part of this pattern we have seen of people who are advocating hardline immigration policies, not necessarily upholding those policies on their own projects. And so I see this story as the latest example of that.
There's this contradiction between Musk's public rhetoric on immigration and what's actually going on at his company's job sites. While Musk's posts on X cast undocumented immigrants as criminals, his businesses, like many others across the country, rely on their labor. Workers on the ground have noted the discrepancy too.
One worker told me he found himself asking, why are we here if he doesn't want us? But this worker ultimately concluded that Musk, like so many other business people, was willing to tolerate the presence of these workers because he wanted cheap labor.
It's a fundamental tension that complicates Trump's broader immigration agenda.
Undocumented workers play a really pivotal role in sectors across our economy. If the U.S. were to crack down at the border the way Donald Trump has expressed that he intends to, it would spell big problems for construction, for agriculture, for manufacturing. And I think that the case of Tesla is just an interesting example of how companies all across our economy really rely on these workers.
Julia says it's unlikely that Tesla or SpaceX will see any direct ramifications for using undocumented laborers.
I think that one thing that is striking about our immigration system is there tends to be a lot of emphasis on pursuing individuals who violate the law by crossing the border without authorization. It's much less common to see enforcement actions against companies that employ undocumented workers.
This is The Big Take from Bloomberg News. I'm Sarah Holder. This episode was produced by David Fox. It was edited by Tracy Samuelson and Jeremy Keene. It was fact-checked by Adriana Tapia and mixed and sound designed by Alex Sugiura. Special thanks to Angel Recio. Our senior producer is Naomi Shavin. Our senior editor is Elizabeth Ponso. Our executive producer is Nicole Beamsterboer. Sage Bauman is Bloomberg's head of podcasts. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe and review The Big Take wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps people find the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.